Welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. I know many of you are coming from different time zones, so thank you very much for being here. Just a couple of things before I get into the introductions. During this presentation, if you don't mind maintaining your mics on the mute position, that would be very much appreciated, as well as your cameras off to kind of protect our broadband. The second thing, I'd like to thank very much our presenters today. We have Susan Bonfield coming all the way from Colorado. I know she had to wake up very early this morning to join us. So thank you, Susan. Susan is the Director of Environment for the Americas. It's an international conservation and preservation NGO based out of Boulder, Colorado. Now, those of you who are with the World Bank know, because I've spoken to you about this several times, they have been accepted as an international group within our Community Connections campaign. So we welcome you, Susan, and welcome to the World Bank family. It's great to have you guys. Susan has also brought with her Sarai Contreras, Dr. Sarai Contreras, who's coming to us live from the University of Guadalajara in Jalisco, Mexico. Sorry, I just kind of messed up your Guadalajara.
It's fine.
Imagine, even a Spanish speaker can say that difficult word. But anyway, it's a beautiful place. So apologies, but I'll turn it back over to Susan and to Sarai in just a moment. The last reminder I'd like to say to you is that this event is being recorded for the sake of study purposes. It will not be shared. It will only be shared amongst people who are interested in this topic. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Susan. Q&A will be held to the end, but if you have any burning questions during the event, just put them into the chat box and I'll be happy to call them out to Susan during the presentation. So with that, Susan, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julia. And thank you for inviting us into your World Bank family. We really appreciate the opportunity to work with you and to meet some of your members and staff. And thanks to everyone who's joining us this morning. And to Sarai, who is our valued partner in Mexico. This is a cross-border program that works to conserve migratory hummingbirds. And so what I want to do is share with you some of the magic of hummingbirds and some of the work that we do to help preserve them. This is, as I mentioned, a multi-country partnership. And, you know, it's because these hummingbirds migrate such long distances and we all share in their conservation and the preservation of their habitat and their protection, not only as they migrate, but also when they nest in the United States and Canada and as they overwinter. They're all with Sarai right now in Mexico. So they need to be protected on all sides of the borders. These are our little superheroes, and I just want to say this is such an amazing group of birds, the hummingbirds. They have so many adaptations to help in their survival. For one, and you can see some of the curiosities of the hummingbird family, you know, they're only found in the Western Hemisphere. So if you're to go to other parts of the world, you won't find hummingbirds. So they're very unique to the Americas flyways and to all of the countries from Canada to Argentina. They have some real curiosities, as I mentioned. For example, there's one species that has a bill that is as long, at least as long or longer than its body length. They are adapted in this way so that they feed on certain flowers. And so they serve as important pollinators, pollinating flowers with those beaks that are adapted to reach down into those tubes to gather the nectar that they need to survive. They're also some of our smallest birds, and the bee hummingbird of Cuba is one of the smallest, is the smallest species, and you can see from the nest what a tiny little thing this is. And even our migratory species in the United States that we share with Mexico, those are also quite small, and so it's hard to imagine them actually making those long distance journeys of up to 3,000 or more miles. They have an incredibly fast wing beat. This is one of the species that can actually hover. And as you can see, it needs to do that because it needs to be able to insert its beak into the flower to reach down for that nectar. But they have this amazing capacity to move their wings in a figure eight so that they can hover above or even below a flower to gather what they need. They have a very high metabolism, which means that they need to be feeding regularly and they need to get a high amount of energy to keep them going. A lot of people don't know it, but they actually do eat insects, and that's one of the places where they get an important source of protein. So insects do provide an important component of their diet. They also have the highest density of feathers, and of course this small little body has to be kept warm. Even on cold nights, and I know here in Colorado we often have snow at the same time that we have hummingbirds, and they're still able to survive. And that is because of the density of their feathers, and also because they're able to actually go into a form of torpor where they lower their body temperature so low that they're almost hibernating, and that is how they survive those very cold nights here in Colorado. Feather iridescence is another wonderful adaptation that they have. And if you've seen a hummingbird and you've watched the beautiful, what we call the throat or the gorget, a flaming color that they demonstrate, especially during the courtship season. And they're so talented at the use of this gorget or this color that apparently these males, they use this color and this flash of color to attract females. The males can actually turn themselves at the best angle to the light so that the color is the most vivid that it can be. And of course, in our history, hummingbirds have always played a role. And in fact, the creation of the stars, there's a creation story of the stars that is based on the flight of a hummingbird. They're considered good luck in many cultures. They're a symbol of love, and that can be a good or a bad thing for them, but a lot of people believe that they're really good luck charms. So what's happening that we're so concerned about hummingbirds and why we're proposing this project and appreciate any support you have to give to hummingbirds? There's a really significant declines in some populations of hummingbirds, and this is one of the species that has been declining over 42% since the 1970s. It's one of the species that has been recognized by all groups as a species that could disappear before our very eyes without our knowing why. And we know that there are so many factors that affect hummingbirds because of the distances that they travel, and also because of everything that they need along the way, and because of the challenges that they face during those journeys. The rufous hummingbird has a fairly spectacular migration route. It's what's known as a circular migration route. And what that means is that right now, as you see, it's in Mexico where Sarai is working to protect it. But come early spring, late winter, it starts moving up usually the coast of California until it reaches its nesting areas in the Northwest and even as far away as Alaska. Once it's finished nesting in about mid-July, it starts heading back down and it comes to my neck of the woods. So it follows the Rocky Mountains, traveling southward until again it crosses the border and into Mexico. But of course, these birds don't know borders, so they are traveling without any visas or passports, only seeking what they need and going to the places where they've been before. There are some unusual occurrences with rufous hummingbird these days. For example, one was just sighted in New Jersey. There seems to be a resident wintering population establishing itself in the southeast as well. So it's doing some peculiar things, and we're not sure why, but we, of course, have some speculations and concerns as to why that might be happening. Ruby-throated hummingbird, which is the species for those of you who are located in the east, is also a long-distance migrant, and it travels from the eastern parts of the U.S. all the way down to Central America, where it also overwinters, and it's also in Mexico too. So Sarai's been talking about seeing many numbers of ruby-throated hummingbirds recently. This is the primary species that you see in the eastern United States. There are some other species like the errant, the rufous hummingbirds that show up again in the southeast and in parts of the northeast, but the ruby-throated hummingbird is the most common So these journeys, as we know, they are very risky and fraught with threats along the way. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of those threats and some of what we think may be affecting populations of rufous hummingbird. And we're trying to work to fill in the gaps of our knowledge about some of these factors and working with partners, again, across the border to fill in those gaps, not just in the United States, but also in Mexico and Canada. This is an ocotillo, and this is a plant that's common in the Southwest. This is a flowering plant that's very important to migratory hummingbirds. And what happens is as hummingbirds start to leave where Saraí is in Mexico and they head up north, crossing the border into Arizona, California, they depend on the flowering of this ocotillo plant. These beautiful red flowers provide the nectar that they need to make that journey as they move up to their nesting sites, again, as far away as Alaska. Some of the birds actually reach high elevations. For example, another species travels up to 10,000 feet in elevation in the Rocky Mountains, the broad-tailed hummingbird. It depends on a flower called the glacier lily, which is one of the earliest blooming flowers. And when it arrives, the snow is just melting and this glacier lily is just emerging. And the way the hummingbird survives is by having this glacier lily present at the edges of the snow melt. And that's what it feeds on until the next flowering plant comes along, which is the dwarf larkspur. The dwarf larkspur then supports the broad-tailed hummingbird, which is a species found in the western United States and also where I am. This is the one that supports it while it's building its nest and raising its young. And so it's very critical for hummingbirds that they have the dwarf larkspur at the right time. What we're noticing, and what I'm sure you're noticing, is that we have earlier springs and warmer temperatures, and this is obviously something that affects flowering plants. Some of the plants are flowering earlier. So for example, glacier lily can bloom up to 19 days early now, and the dwarf larkspur is blooming about 9 to 17 days earlier. At the same time, this species of hummingbird, the broadtail, is only arriving 1 to 6 days earlier. So we have what is called potentially a mismatch in timing. That timing and mismatch can be have a devastating effect on the broad-tailed hummingbird if it's not able to find other flowering plants that it prefers that support it in its energetic needs during the nesting season and as it migrates. And I'm sure you're all aware of the fires that have been happening in the West. These fires, increasing in frequency and intensity, have devastating effects on the on habitat. Some fire, of course, is good, and we need those fires. Some of these extreme fires are more difficult. And one of the reasons why they're more difficult, it is more challenging for our fire managers to get out and to support restoration when there's so much habitat that is in need of it. In addition, we're working with a lot of areas on how to restore habitat for hummingbirds. Typically, we restore bushes and trees, but what hummingbird needs are flowers. And so what we need to include in our management and in our planning are those seeds that grow the flowers that hummingbirds need, again, while migrating and while nesting. There are others, even at your home, that are big threats to migratory hummingbirds and to other species, of course. Cats are one of the leading killers of birds, and cats, of course, are quite intelligent and can figure out very quickly that a hummingbird feeder means some source of food or entertainment or prey for that cat. So keeping cats indoors is critical, but we know that there are many cats outdoors that do kill birds, including hummingbirds. Hummingbirds feeders themselves can be very good, but they can also be very dangerous for hummingbirds. And these are places where diseases can be spread. Also, this red dye in the hummingbird food is really not necessary. There's plenty of red to attract a hummingbird. But at the end, and this red dye may actually impact the health of a hummingbird. And then, of course, there are window collisions, and this is something that happens all along a bird's migratory route. Hummingbirds are one of the hardest hit by windows. Birds don't recognize windows, and actually humans don't either. But birds especially don't recognize that windows are present, and they collide with the glass pane, and then that kills them. So it's one of the big concerns about how we can provide education to communities about how to make their windows much more visible. And then again, I mentioned that hummingbirds are such important pollinators for our native flowers, and they need them for their survival. They will feed on exotic plants, like, for example, some of those that you might plant in your garden, but they actually do better with native flowering plants. And so the loss of native flowering plants, whether it's in natural habitat or whether it's in gardens or planted yards, can also affect their ability to survive as they nest and as they migrate or overwinter. So without further ado, I want to share the core of our program. And as Julia mentioned, Environment for the Americas works internationally for the protection of migratory birds, but we have a very people component to our work. Our mission is to connect people to nature and to bird conservation. And so a lot of our work involves education and training and outreach and the human touch, so that we serve as a bridge to these communities and helping them to become more aware of the amazing spectacle of migratory birds and their surroundings. Sarayi has been an important partner of ours for many years, and the work that she does in Mexico is absolutely amazing. So Sarayi, I'm going to turn this over to you now, and thank you so much for joining us this morning.
So I will let you know that the next because I don't have the control to.
Oh, right. Okay.
Okay. So yeah, thank you so much, Susan, and thanks everybody to be with us here and share this experience. Could you pass the next one, please? Yeah, okay. The place where I work and many people of women that take care about hummingbirds work here in Western Mexico, that is located in Jalisco. And as you can see, Aguacapan is an ejido, and this ejido is a beautiful and magical ejido where I will describe in the following slide. The next, please. In this place in Aguacapan, I really enjoy this because it is distributed in a different altitudinal gradient. We have different ecosystems, from deciduous tropical forests in the lowlands, subtropical forests and thorn forests, pine oak forest, cloud forest, and in the top of the mountains, you can find some beautiful temperate forests that include the extension of this ejido include 1,500 hectares. So most of the land of this ejido is in a buffer zone and the core area or zone of the Biosphere Reserve Sierra de Manantlan, one of the important protected areas declared by the federal government. So as you can see here, we have this logo from the Biosphere Reserve, but also we have an intermunicipality union that put together all the local government to make decisions about the huge area as declared as a watershed. The following, please. In this altitudinal gradient in Aguacapan, we have 24 species of beautiful hummingbirds. And these represent all the species that we have in the west central Mexico, including Nayarit, Jalisco, Colima, and Sinaloa. So all those species that make a beautiful community and make a great functionality for the ecosystem, as we know, like pollinators. The thing is that we receive all the 7 long migratory distance hummingbirds that are in western of North America, but also we have the western endemic species and the residents. So this is a beautiful community, as you can see in this picture. The next, please. So we have different ecosystem of forests. We have a great community of hummingbirds, and also we have a beautiful culture in this ejido. And we are talking about since 200 years ago. And in this town, we have the biggest hacienda that was very, very important to for the people that surrounded the area. And also something that called my attention is that the agricultural activities like sugarcane cultivation made that make that people can have their own coin. I mean, the hacienda have their own coin. Sorry for my English. The next, please. As Susan say, okay, we have this different aspect, the people, the richness of hummingbirds, but also we have a very high fires, amount of fires. So what we wanted to do here is to conserve hummingbirds through the research and monitoring program, through education and training, and also with outreach work, especially with women that can help to protect all this environment. The next, please. So our work conserves hummingbirds through the empowerment of rural and indigenous women of Western Mexico. Next, please. And I will describe some activities that I really enjoy working with these women and also ejidos and also men and different people and different institutions. And I would like to know about this Turismo de Naturaleza Huacapan. It's the group of women of Huacapan, and Ofelia Carranza, that is the leader. They start working in 2015, and as you can see, they work in their own logo to identify the key components of their place. And you can see the green is the forest, the culture represented by this capilla, and as you can see, the hummingbird, and also the water. The next, please. So since that time, since 2015 to through this year, we have been developing 12 workshops with different topics. And that topics are required from women, especially like customer services, hummingbird conservation, bird watching, trail design, how to manage the food to serve to the inside of a restaurant, stewardship, culture, environment, and women empowerment. The next. So with this workshop also, and the women's acts to maintain this beautiful place that is called El Charco de las Truchas. And this is a very natural pool that the water comes from the different, from the mountain. And you can see in your right top, you can see this pool natural, and this place is for recreation activities, and they can receive some groups. You know, they have been developing this area with a lot of effort and working most of the time like a free. They don't receive money to do that, and so this Ofelia Carranza has been a very key leader that she likes to work to improve the lives of other women. and spread the word about the hummingbirds and their conservation, improve the habitats. So this is a very important place to learn about nature and the values of like ecosystem service also. The next. So what we have been doing from the University of Guadalajara is working together with other institutions as the Biosphere Reserve and HIRA and this community. And we start an ecotourism project since 2017. And I really like this experience because the community came to design these trails, and they wanted to talk what they learned from their parents, from their grandparents. So what we did as a university and also with the help of Western Hummingbird Partnership was to put all this knowledge through different trails. So we have been enjoying this, and they have been very happy to share all this nature and cultural information through anybody. Next, please. As you can see here, there are some parties to enjoy what we have been doing, the working with women, with trails to conserve hummingbirds. And also you can see this, the group of people that support. Of course, there are other people, but this is like a picture that represents when we finished to establish the station for some of the trails. Next, please. And the most beautiful thing also is that they ask. I remember when they ask, when the local ejidatario asked about, and he said, Sarai, we have a lot of hummingbirds. You say that because you research. And you know, I want that Aguacampan can be recognized because the hummingbirds. So I really love the idea that came from the community and asked to have a festival. So we have the first Hummingbird Festival on November 2018. And we have a lot of different activities from environmental education, mariachi, conference, and observation of hummingbirds. So we really enjoy this because it put all the efforts from different institutions, and many people could enjoy this knowledge and be awareness from for the members and what they need. The next, please. I really like this picture, and I like because it represents most of the women, some women that participate in organizing this festival. As you can see, Susan is here, and she also helped a lot to represent all this international community, because sometimes we have meetings, international meetings for this festival. Also, as you can see, the local women and students, and the folklore, as you can see in this picture, the green, the red, represent also a very, very local bird dance. So we really enjoy these festivals, and you are invited to come here because it's really nice. The next, please. So that was our first, and also, fortunately, we have the second Hummingbird Festival this year, but it was in January before the COVID. And also it was very successful. We have international workshop at the top of the mountains and in the Las Joyas Scientific Station. And also we have different activities. And something that is very important is that women from Aguacapan felt more comfortable, more stronger, and they could organize better the activities. So that we could see. The next, please. Here you can see some of the how to say certain of little kids that participate to represent hummingbirds that they have in their community, and all the material that I use are recycled. So mothers likes to that the children can participate in this festival, and also the schools, the secondary school, elementary school, and it's a very beautiful parade, beautiful festival, because the people from Aguacapan can offer different things like food, also dances, stories about the town, the beautiful of the nature. So it's a very nice festival. The next, please. I almost done. Also, what we have been working with the Biosphere Reserve in the Sierra de Manantlan, and this represent during the COVID, is that they can be, women need to be more to share experience. So we have here is women from different rural community that are leaders from these different communities, and we brought together to share experience, and we have some techniques on how to work in a cooperative way. Next, please. So yeah, this is the last one, and of course we have been doing different activities, but also with the COVID there are new challenges, and I list these challenges. You know, el Charco de las Truchas, the swimming pool, natural swimming pool, has been closed since March because the COVID. And do you remember this place when maybe you don't see it, but there was a wall, but with the last raining season, the wall fell, and we need to build it. The women need support to maintain the site and their activities. They are saving money to buy a truck, but still they need to keep to save more money. They are working in a nursery to grow native plants for pollinators. They starting participating in a hummingbird research and monitoring program. This is very beautiful because they wanted to know how we do the research, and now this beautiful lady, she started and learning more about the techniques to study hummingbirds. So thank you so much, and that's it.
Well, Susan and Sarai, that certainly kept my attention. Thank you very much. Most of all, it was eye candy, you know, all the beautiful colors, and colibri, as we call them in Latin America, are just so fantastic to see them. Whether we see them in North America or in Latin America, it's just a gorgeous sight to the eye. At this time, if anybody wants to unmute themselves and actually speak to the presenters, you're welcome to do so, or you can continue putting your questions in the chat box. I know that Susan was having quite a conversation here about baby birds and beaks and things. So, Susan, are there some general comments you want to make at this time?
Sure. I just want to follow up on Sarai's presentation and say that the community of Awakapan and a lot of these indigenous communities, and if you're familiar with the ejido system, it's a collective way of managing the land or living in communities in Mexico, is actually at the foothills of what's called the Sierra de Manatlan Biosphere Reserve. And so it's a recognized area of importance to birds, including some of the birds that we share between the US and Mexico. So it's an extremely important area, and I just can't speak to how important and empowering the connections to hummingbirds and how they've managed to turn it into an event and a consciousness of raising activity in that community, how important that is to the protection of birds in the reserve. One of the things that's different is that in parks or reserves in Mexico, people can actually live within them. So having them be more aware of hummingbirds and what they need to survive is just critical. I know that there were some questions generally about the biology of like how hummingbirds feed their young and how they survive. And hummingbirds have an amazing tongue, actually, that's like a straw. And so when they insert their beak into the flowering plant, and again, their beak shapes are designed. I might go back to one of Sarai's amazing slides of all those hummingbirds. All those beaks are different. They've evolved to fit into certain kinds of flowers. So they're actually floral preferences that some hummingbirds may have, depending on their beak shape, their beak length, and even the curvature of the beak. So they have to have those certain flowers around so that they can feed and get the nectar that they need. They take that nectar in, and then again, as I said, they do also feed on insects. And Sarai, feel free to hop in at any time, but you can see all these hummingbirds have short beaks, long beaks, straight beaks, curved beaks, and they do. One of the things that we learned in one of our research projects is that they have strong preferences for certain flowers. And for example, one type of flower may make up about 50% of their diet. Typically, when an adult hummingbird feeds its young, it regurgitates that nectar and insect into the baby's mouth. And so, you've seen the pictures of chicks opening their mouths up. So the parent actually regurgitates the food down in there so that it goes, you've seen sometimes looks like the parent's beak is all the way down their throat. So it's looks a little disturbing, but that's how they do that. We're getting a lot of questions of interest about nesting. There are a lot of species that Sarai and her team study in Mexico. So including the migratory species, there are a lot of hummingbirds that don't migrate. So they stay down in Mexico. We have some hummingbirds that stay in the United States, or individuals of a species that don't migrate or do short local migrations. So just depending on that species. But the rufous hummingbird, of course, is is a longer distance migrant. So has a long way to go. That's the Western species. And like Julia said, if anybody wants to open up and go live, we're happy to take questions. I've been to Sarai's Hummingbird Festival both years, and it's just a beautiful event. So she invited you. You should take her up on it. We do try to combine that event with a trip to that part of Mexico to go up into the Sierra de Manatlan Biosphere Reserve. That's one of the ways we try to raise some funds for the project to support the women there and their work. And as you know, for the indigenous women in all parts of the world, sometimes having your own business, running your own store like they're doing, the restaurant that they run and the store they have, can be quite difficult. Especially COVID has had a big impact because tourism has basically stopped. So there's no one coming in. The restaurant has had to shut down. So things aren't being maintained, as Sarai mentioned. So your support can help make that transition back to hopefully soon a post-COVID time much simpler.
Yes, go ahead, Sarai.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, something important talking about what hummingbirds feed when they are in winter here in Mexico are those flowers that come just after the rain season. So they start growing up, and they also are because they have a little disturbance. Those flowers, especially for rufous hummingbirds, became after a fire. So we have two sides of the fires. We need to control the fires about frequency, about the extension, and also the intensity in order to have the food for hummingbirds. But if these fires are big and they are different from the historical regime of fires, can be dangerous. So that is why we are trying to do prescribed burnings here, and the women want to participate in this in order to create also habitats for hummingbirds, so especially for this rufous hummingbird.
Yeah, thanks, Sarai, for clarifying the issue with fires. That our fires, of course, for those of you who are watching, were so bad in the West this year that I tend to think of them as it was just so bad. You know, we had smoke for weeks, and but there is the good side of fire too, and that is that it is a natural part of our environment, and in some habitats, it's actually critical for restoration of forests and, like Sarai said, the flowers that hummingbirds need. So those open spaces that are opened up by fire can be important to providing some of the flowering plants that hummingbirds need. So fire is good, and then fire, when, like Sarai said, uncontrolled and intense and too frequent, can be challenging.
Exactly.
Sarai, this is Julia. I'd like to know whether the work that's being done at the university, are you guys partnering with other countries in Latin America to kind of expand the studies of colibri?
Yeah, actually, we start thanks also to Susan through the Western Hummingbird Partnership and the day of the World Migratory Bird Day with Venezuela. We have been working with Venezuela, and we have a workshop especially from them. So they came to visit our place, and we share information. So now they will start doing more studies of hummingbirds and try to understand also the migration that can come from the south to Mexico. We don't know many things. We don't know the complete sites of hummingbirds, especially for the neotropics hummingbirds. So it's something that we start working that.
Thank you very much. If anybody else has a question, feel free to unmute yourself at this time.
Yes, feel free.
Oops. Am I unmuted now? Can you hear me? There we go. So I'll just add to what Sarai said about the training with Venezuela. We also hosted the first Mexico-U.S. training in January in conjunction with the Huacapan Hummingbird Festival. And that brought in biologists from across Mexico to learn some of the techniques for studying hummingbirds. And then, of course, they got to see the festival as a way of raising awareness in their own communities or promoting ecotourism. And so that was really helpful. We did have interest from other countries, but the capacity just wasn't there. And of course, it was our first workshop, so we wanted to keep it manageable so that we could work out the kinks, of a workshop. But there's definitely been, Julia, a lot of interest from other countries about learning the skills to research and also to provide education about hummingbirds.
Susan, I saw your conversation there, very strong conversation with one of our participants regarding feeders and formulas that can be shared with hummingbirds. I know that most of us, love to see the hummingbirds when they show up in our yards, but I think that conversation was very important. Can you kind of summarize what the recommendations that you made to my colleague regarding the feeding of hummingbirds?
Sure, that's always a question to everyone who works towards conserving hummingbirds. And anywhere you go, especially in the tropics where there's so many hummingbird species, if you go for bird watching, you're going to see sites that actually put up even dozens of hummingbird feeders to attract hummingbirds to them, so that people can see them more easily. We have, there have been some studies in Mexico that have shown that hummingbird feeders don't provide as good a nutrition as native flowers. And there are others that, don't show any kind of impact or harm from the feeders themselves. I mean, obviously, it's such a difficult question to answer. And the reason why is that those hummingbird feeders are they're such a great connection to birds, and we recognize that people love to see them and love to see them up close. I mentioned in my message that here in Colorado, I have a hummingbird feeder, and I know that when we had a surprise snow in mid-September, I suspect that the feeders in our neighborhood were maybe a critical source of much needed energy for the hummingbirds that were still here. So they can play a good role. There are a couple things about having a hummingbird feeder if you're going to have one. First is that we do really promote planting native flowers, so giving hummingbirds an option. You may see fewer hummingbirds around your feeder if you have good flowering plants, and flowering plants that are rotating throughout the season that the hummingbirds are near your house are just really a wonderful thing to offer to your hummingbirds. Secondly, as I mentioned in that message for those who may not have seen it, is that you don't need to put red dye in the water. Hummingbirds actually feed off of a variety of colors of plants, blue plants, purple plants, yellow plants, and red ones, of course. And your hummingbird feeder has enough red on it to attract hummingbirds to it. So you don't need to have red dye in the water. And in fact, that red dye might be bad for hummingbirds. Their bodies are so small, and any chemicals or anything like that has such a big impact on them. Third, again, if you have an outdoor cat and you have a feeder, then you're putting those hummingbirds at risk of being captured by a cat. And placement of the hummingbird feeder is also critical. So if you have windows to which birds might fly and collide, then your hummingbird needs to be placed in a way that it doesn't lead the hummingbirds to your window. So you want to make sure that the placement is good. And I know we want to put the hummingbird feeder right out the window. Anything you can do to make that window visible. At Environment for the Americas, we have a whole suite of materials you can use, from bird-friendly tape that you can put on your window that's, it's see-through, to ideas about hanging cord outside your window. But, definitely after those birds have migrated such long distances and gone through their seasons of breeding or overwintering, we want to make sure that that window doesn't become a death trap. So those are all the ins and outs of feeding, not just hummingbirds actually, but any bird species. So I know we, again, consider it a great educational opportunity.
That was great. I certainly would be very mindful of where I place my feeder. One summer I found my son kept placing feeders in a really very tall tree, and it's like I couldn't reach him to refill them. But Mom, I don't want the cats to get them. So I said, okay, So yes, I totally hear that. So I know that in my yard we have a lot of rose of Lebanon or something like this. It's a very large flower, a trumpet type of flower, and I have caught many a hummingbird just loving those plants. So I'm always afraid. I don't know. I'm sure they know what they can and cannot eat.
Exactly. Exactly.
I don't want them poisoned, right?
Right. No, they definitely know what they can and can't eat. And they have an amazing memory. I'll follow up with one more thing about the hummingbird feeders, which is it's really important to keep those things clean. So when it gets hot in the summer, they tend to get moldy, and that mold can actually be fatal to hummingbirds. So washing your hummingbird feeders out and replacing that sugar water is really critical. But on that note of what hummingbirds are feeding on, they definitely know what to feed on. And in fact, studies have shown that when they forage on those flowering plants, they actually have a memory. They have this amazing memory, so that they know what flower they've fed on and how long it's going to take for that flower to have more nectar, so they don't waste their time actually going back to the flower if it doesn't have any nectar in it. It's just incredible how they do that. Oh, and thanks. I see that Randall has been on, and thank you so much for joining. We also coordinate World Migratory Bird Day, and we incorporate hummingbird activities into our celebrations of migratory birds. So it's great to see some of our partners joining in. And again, they're expressing interest in hummingbird studies in Costa Rica, and I know we got some great consideration, interest in the workshops. So we're really excited to move forward with more of those.
Randall, I've unmuted you, so if you want to say hello to everyone, please, by all means, tell us about Costa Rica.
Hi, everybody. This is Randall from Costa Rica. Thank you for this very interesting presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And congratulations, Sarah. Hi, for your work.
Thank you, Randall. You are invited to come here anytime. Everybody can come.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, Julia, when's the World Bank's next international traveling trip?
Well, I think with COVID around, I think you guys are going to have to take us on a visual field trip. So
yeah,
now.
We're waiting anxiously for that.
Kind of as a reminder, I have placed the Environment for the Americas URL in your chat box. So if you want to know more about the work that Environment for the Americas is doing throughout the Western Hemisphere, feel free to check it out there. And I'm hoping that, when they have trips, planned, that they'll post them there so that maybe some of us can take advantage.
And that was the first trip that we offered, was in January, right before COVID. And we were so fortunate to have been able to we combined the workshop with the trip, and the support that we received, really, it helped everybody in the community. I feel like that trip was really valuable. It brought new faces to the event. It was a good training opportunity, not just for Ahuacapan, but for the people who came to the program from the U.S. and Mexico. We all learned so much. And, we all know that giving a boost to the local economy and highlighting the great work people do is just, it makes such important connections, such long-lasting connections, and really helps to support all of this conservation work.
Well, we are 5 minutes to the hour now. If no one else has any questions, I am going to bring this to a close. But first of all, just thank you, Susan and Sarai, for being with us today. It was such a pleasant and experience, as well as a very insightful and something that we can grow from. I continue to invite everyone to please connect with Environment for the Americas, or just put your questions here. I will relay them to them. As a reminder, the video is going to be available later. It takes a couple of hours for the video to render, and I will make it available to you guys. Okay. So thank you very much, and feel free to unmute yourself and greet the presenters. I will keep this event open for at least 2 or 3 more minutes. So thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Susan and Sarai.
Oh,
Good
thank
day,
you,
everybody.
Julia. We just have
Thank you,
really
Julia.
appreciated your support.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, the other activity we managed to sneak in, right, Julia, was having an event at the World Bank. Early
Yeah,
in
COVID.
2020, my last trip, right? And that was such an amazing event for World Migratory Bird Day, and of course, focusing on including hummingbirds and how we track the migrations of birds and learn about them. And that was just a fantastic event. We really appreciate everything.
Oh, you're very welcome.